Don't look down. Don't look down. Hey friends, it's your good friend Tim Campbell Smith, and today I am walking you through all the different ways that men's mental health is different than women's, trans, and other non-binary folks and other folks. There is, at the time of recording, so about middle of 2025, there is a lot in the news about the male loneliness epidemic. The male loneliness epidemic has not happened in isolation. It has happened because of a lot of different things that are still present today. So we're gonna break down why this has happened, how it has come to be, and maybe a couple strategies to combat it. In this video, I'm applying everything I've learned about mental health so far, and especially gendered health, and how maybe blanket strategies in our understanding of mental health, but also how we deal with it, aren't effective. Before we go too far, make sure you like and subscribe for all things mental health, higher ed, business, life. Okay, so I think the easiest way to do this is to kind of walk through life. Let's start with childhood. I know sometimes folks kind of wonder, why do we always talk about childhood when we talk about mental health? Generally, it's because this is a time that we are so susceptible to change and to adversity, and it can have such long-lasting impacts throughout life. So this is why we look at childhood. In the beginning, boys are not taught, we call it socialization, but really that just means taught and taught in groups. Boys, we are not taught to talk about our emotions, to address emotions the way girls are. In fact, we don't really talk about it, so we're not developing language for it early in life. With this though, boys are being conditioned, and that's fancy psychological speak for taught and reinforced. Boys are being conditioned to keep to ourselves and to be more independent. Interestingly, a couple of reports that I read in preparation for this video and in talking to mental health counselors who work with men, there is interesting research that boys as young as kindergarten, 5 or 6 years old, are being conditioned through report cards. They are being, and in the classroom, they are being praised, and it's showing up on their report cards as positive praise when they are independent, when they keep to themselves, when they are quiet. And this is also really interesting because girls at the same age are being expected to build social relationships. So boys are being taught to be independent, girls are being taught to be in community. So there's a little bit of a double standard, but also there's something here that's harming boys. So from a young age, when you are teaching boys to be compliant and you're teaching them to not talk about their emotions or their feelings, you have this perfect recipe for not addressing or dealing with mental health. For boys, there are less opportunities to be in collaboration and to work with others. For example, in gym class, boys are often encouraged to do things alone. Girls, again, in community and in teams. I find it interesting as someone who goes to the gym. What I see now as an adult at the gym is what I've seen in gym classes when I saw it as a kid and whenever I visited schools. Boys are doing things alone, girls are doing it together. At the gym that I go to, classes are almost all women and no men. But then out on the machines and out on the floor, it's mostly men. And boys, we are taught from an early age lessons like suck it up, tough it out. And these are messages that we're getting from other men in our lives. Often from very close social circles, family, distant family, and friends. And by extension, our friends' families. Now, there's also been interesting research at the intersection of developmental psychology, but also brain scans and neuropsychology, that basically what boys struggle with shows up as difficulties as men. So these are often disorders of motivation, so either too much or too little, or psychomotor, so again, motor, behavior, physical movement, impulse, which explains why why we have higher rates of violence, aggression, but also social isolation, why we struggle with fear and anger. So now let's move to older teens and into adult years. And adult years up to 50, and we'll talk about why in a bit. Research has shown, first and foremost, that in teens, late teens, or young adults, there are lower rates of what we call emotional literacy, ability to understand, recognize, and moderate our emotions and that of others in boys. So men, we are at the mercy of what we do not know. We are susceptible to, we are being influenced by the things we don't know and we don't think about and we don't seem to care about. In teen years, and especially later teen years and young adult years, and then it becomes more permanent, we start to see new and different ways of adversity showing up and how we respond to adversity. One interesting finding, I was fascinated by this, is that when boys and men experience depression or anxiety, the first symptom that's most likely to show up is irritability. Typically with anxiety, we think of being anxious, nervous, on edge. Depression, we tend to think of pervasive, just sadness, can't get out of bed, and it rarely ever looks just like that. But in men, it actually shows up as irritability first. And another adaptive, and I would argue a lot of the time maladaptive strategy that comes up is anger. Blow-ups happen. Funny thing about anger as an emotion, anger is often, not always, and I don't even know if I'd say a majority of the time, but anger is often a mask for something else. And I'll give you a hint, it's usually sadness. But men will blow up. We will have big outbursts of anger, often because something else is going on. In teens and adult years, coping strategies also change, and they start to really diverge from what we see in women and other folks. A go-to strategy for men are substances. Men are far more likely to be diagnosed more with a substance use disorder than women. Men will also, as a coping strategy, turn to physical movement. So this can look like violence. This can look like aggression. This also can look like exercise. This can also look like very physical jobs. But also social isolation. Men will just retreat back away from other folks and from friends' community. Men in adversity or dare I even say trauma will often turn to intellectualization. So in my research, I found especially when men experience divorce and divorce with children, the first coping strategy will be intellectualization, or thinking it and thinking about thinking. And let me tell you something, mental health 101, you gotta feel your feelings. When you suppress your feelings, when you try to hide it, when you try to push it down, it creates a lot of other problems. When you intellectualize, when you think about and think a lot and you think about thinking, that is just also a perfect recipe for anxiety and depression, among other mental illnesses. Other coping strategies that we commonly see in men, overworking, so throwing ourselves into our career, into our work a little bit more, substance abuse, or just risky behaviors. With men, especially now into adult years, our life events start to take different tolls on us and have different effects on us. Fatherhood is a big one. It's often driven by our own perceptions of what it means and what it requires to be a father, and that can cause some really good things to happen. That can also cause some big problems to happen. Speaking of fatherhood in relationships, and especially, relationships with another partner or partners, there's this phenomenon where men tend to lose themselves in the relationship, where they constantly say yes. They say yes to, and I've had this show up in my comments where people say, I say yes to my wife to appease her. And then we lose ourselves because we didn't say no when we wanted to, and we just said yes to things. So we end up kind of building or having this life that we didn't ask for. Because of being socialized to be a little more isolated and not as in community, not prioritize friends, men tend to make friends first through our partners and then through our work, or if we're lucky, or hobbies, if we are making friends that way. Making our own friends through work and hobbies is the ideal situation. Making it through partners can be a little precarious in terms of if there's ever a breakup or a divorce. The other big thing I would say that affects men, especially in our adult years in our mental health, is this perception that we have to earn things. Men, we often have to earn our careers. We have to fight for our partners. We have to earn respect. That constant struggle is a really big drain and can be really problematic. And then as adults, what's also making the mental health situation worse is the medical system. When it comes to interacting with medical professionals and diagnoses, first, men are going to our doctors and going to helping professionals far less than women because of the way we've been conditioned, because of the way we've been raised. That in and of itself is a problem. Next, though, when we do go to the doctors, our problems and our challenges are often deemed to be behavioral. Whereas women, it tends to be medicalized. So if a woman is, just a hypothetical example, constantly nervous, constantly anxious because of a new job, she's more likely to be diagnosed with anxiety, whereas a man is more likely to be told he's just not coping well enough and he needs to. So it's kind of interesting that women are more likely to be overdiagnosed, men are more likely to be underdiagnosed. Men are more likely to be diagnosed with a substance use disorder, and these are really interesting because statistically speaking, there's almost always a comorbidity or another problem going on. And a lot of folks in the substance abuse and mental health space usually say and agree, and I know this was certainly my experience and what I've read, is that substances are a solution to a problem. Find that underlying problem. That's probably what's causing the mental illness. Tackle that. But medical professionals will often just stop at the substance abuse. And then mental health, finally, for older adult men, mental health becomes trickier with medical professionals as they get older. And it seems to be around 50 and up. Physicians, especially doctors, will diagnose less and they will discuss mental illness less. One, because of the perception of comorbidities and them thinking, oh, there's other health problems that are more important, but also what they think their patient cares about. Oh, my patient probably doesn't care about their anxiety. They're probably more focused on their blood pressure. Is something a doctor might be thinking and working off of. So the quality of care that a man is going to get later in life is going to be lower. And that's not okay. I think the other big thing that's really harming men's mental health is a lack of community care. And this shows up all through life. There's a lack of community care early in boys, when we talked about that focus on independence, on independent well-being, on compliance, when things become more competitive in our teenage years and we're still isolated and lonely, then we become adults. There's just a lack of community care that women tend to have. We don't have it, we don't use it, we haven't used it as a strategy, it's unfamiliar to us. And community care is a tricky one because even if you say, okay, you know what, I'm going to talk to a friend, that is only as available to you as your community is. And that's kind of a fancy way of saying that it's only as possible as your friends are. I think of like the guy friends that I have in my life. Most of them are emotionally aware. I can go to my community, I can go to my guy friends, and we can talk about our feelings. Not everybody has that. Those are the big differences and the big things affecting men's mental health. I think the easiest solution is to talk about it and to normalize talking about it. I'm a huge fan of asking someone, how are you? Actually, and making them explain the answer. I know it annoys my friends sometimes, but it's a good emotional, personal check-in. I go, how are you? And they go, I'm good. Okay, what's making you good? What's actually making you good? And then explain it. It can just be a simple conversation starter, and at the beginning of a conversation, and will have huge effects. Comment and let me know any of your thoughts or questions based on this. Do you have questions about men's mental health? Do you have thoughts? Do you have any similar experiences to what we've talked about? Let me know. And as always, make sure you like and subscribe for all things mental health, business, higher ed, life. Otherwise, we'll chat soon. Bye for now.